All right, Tom. So the Sixers are 1-6 on the season. We just got news this week that Tyrese Maxey is going to be out for a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. Joel Embiid will be back on Tuesday, though. Paul George returned earlier in the week. But my first thing that's been on my mind watching Philly so far this season is I'm not so sure that this team is what we thought they were, in part because of the supporting cast. They've been 22nd in defensive rating so far this year. I know Embiid will be making them better, but I worry that this supporting cast isn't what Sixers fans were anticipating on the defensive end or on the offensive end. They're 26th in three-point rating, and that includes Maxey, because Maxey has not shot the ball well. He also has not taken a leap as a playmaker. He has not elevated the talents of his teammates. So for a team that going into the season, we talked about Embiid not playing back-to-backs. And by the way, Tuesday when he returns, Wednesday is a back-to-back, so he might miss that game. I worry about this team overall because of the way this depth has looked without Embiid, and they're going to be playing without him a lot this season because that seems to be the plan anyway. So that's the first thought on my mind, that Philly is not who we thought they were with or without Joel Embiid.
Yeah, they're going to be without him for quite a bit in those back-to-backs. Who knows if that knee is going to bark up, at some point this season. So even though he's out there now, it doesn't really guarantee much for him. We know the history with him and Paul George, and now we're dealing with a hamstring injury with Tyrese Maxey. So we don't really know the personnel that's going to be out there. And I agree with you. The supporting cast has not been impressive, but I will say this. The one constant we can rely on is that Daryl Morey's teams will be a stampede at the free throw line. I don't really understand it. The fact that Daryl Morey, all of his teams religiously get to the charity stripe. It is like he's like the free throw whisperer or something like that. Did you see Caleb Martin, how many free throws he's taken this season?
Well, at least it's making up for the lack of three-pointers.
Yeah. Not much else is going for him, but he's getting to the line like peak James Harden. He's averaging 6 free throw attempts per game. He's got more free throw attempts this season than LeBron, than Jalen Brunson, than Anthony Edwards. Like Caleb Martin is becoming a free throw merchant.
It makes no sense.
Ant's taken, as you've noted, like 15 3-pointers. So maybe he's not attacking as much. But Caleb Martin has never had 10 free throws in a game entering this season before he joins the Morey free throw merchants. Now he's got 3 of them to his resume this season. So it's astounding to me. Daryl Morey has figured out that if the Philadelphia 76ers or the Houston Rockets are going to compete at a high level, they need to be efficient. And the most efficient shot in the game is getting to the free throw line. And his ranks entering this season at the free throw rate is, for his teams, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 1st, 4th, 6th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 1st, 4th. Like basically top 3, top 5 every year with Daryl Morey's teams. And I'm sitting here like, hey, without Paul George and Joel Embiid, they're not going to be able to do that again. And sure enough, they're 1st this year. So they do have that going for them. But really, if you look at everything else, it is not what you want to see as a Sixers fan. Maybe this looks different when the stars come back, but they're still getting superstar calls for their non-superstar players, unless Caleb Martin is making the leap.
I think for Philly, one of the silver linings, despite the horrific, nightmarish start, is, and this is my second thought of so far this season, is even though they're 1-6, they're only 1 game back from the 10 seed. They are only 2 games back from the 6th seed because the Eastern Conference has been terrible so far this season. And if you look at the Western Conference record versus the East so far this season, the West is 27-11. That's a 70 win percentage so far this season. So the East has been absolutely horrific against the Western Conference, but that means the East is very tightly condensed. It's not like Philly is falling off a cliff here. It's still so early in the year. There's plenty of time for them to climb back up the standings, plenty of time for teams to fall down the standings. But do you make anything of this early season surge that the Western Conference has over the East? Is conference imbalance larger than ever, or is this just the aberration earlier in the season?
We need to bring back the 1 through 16 seeding.
Yes, thank you.
That idea.
I've wanted this for years, Tom. For years.
Yep. And it comes back to travel, whatever. We've been able to break. Yeah, it's only in extreme situations are we going to see Portland versus Miami or New York versus LA in those matchups. I know it adds a little bit of time, but we've already reformed the schedule to include an in-season tournament and a play-in tournament and had a longer all-star break. We can't just add like a couple more days in the schedule, in the postseason schedule, to accommodate that expanded travel if we do a 1-16 tournament. That's what we need to do. It's long overdue. What we're seeing right now is the Brooklyn Nets have the third best record in the Eastern Conference. They're 4-4. They're tied at the third seed in the East. Unreal. And you're telling me that, Charlotte, Brooklyn, or, Chicago, these teams are going to make it into the playoffs over, say, the Lakers or Memphis or Denver. Like, that's what we're looking at, is how stacked the West is compared to the East. The best win percentage that the West has had over the East is 63%. That's the best we've ever seen. And like
what
you
year
said,
was that?
So that was in 2013-14. The Spurs won the championship that year over the Miami Heat, if you remember.
Okay.
So it's been a decade. 63% is the best we've ever seen. And right now it's trending at 71%, right around there. So this is hugely imbalanced. We need to bring back the 1-16 playoff seeding. And it also, Kev, it brings me to this, my second note early this season, is that the Cleveland Cavaliers have gotten off to a great start, 9-0. I think it's like the longest win streak for a new head coach, 9-0 to start the season or close to that. Kenny Atkinson has done a marvelous job re-engineering some of the stuff they do on both ends of the floor. But have you seen their strength of schedule?
Tell me about it, Tom.
Okay. They have played this season the Raptors, the Pistons, the Wizards, the Knicks, Lakers, Orlando, Bucks, Pelicans. Not a single team on that list with a winning record. Okay. And when they played Orlando, that was without Paolo Banchero. And when they played Milwaukee the second time, that was without Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I don't want to throw cold water totally on the Cleveland Cavaliers start. And also, they're still in the Eastern Conference, so they might win 60 games this year just by virtue of playing in the Eastern Conference. But in terms of how good are the Cavs, I think we should just incorporate their strength of schedule, which is one of the easiest in the NBA. And if you're going to put them up on the same tier as the top teams in the league because of that record, just make sure you have that in the back of your head that they have not faced a winning record team so far this season.
And on Friday night, they faced the Warriors. And we just saw Golden State beat Boston on Wednesday night. The Warriors, they faced the same questions. Like, oh, is this fast start because of strength of schedule? Then they did a great job defensively against Boston. They win that game, and now they have a chance to take down an unbeaten on Friday night. So with Cleveland, I've been still trying to figure this team out. I do think they're better. I do think the system is better. I think Garland, obviously, after the issue last year with his jaw, the weight loss and all that, it seems like Garland's back on track. I am a believer that the Cavaliers are better than they were previously. But 9-0 good, a lot of that is due to strength of the schedule. But even then, if you look at their upcoming schedule, Tom, they got Golden State Friday night, right? But then they have Brooklyn, Chicago, Philly, Chicago, Charlotte. And then it's not for another 10 or so days before they face Boston. So their schedule is fairly easy for the most part, depending on how those Philly teams look. So they could be like a 2-loss team or something like that going into Thanksgiving.
And they've got enough guys on their team, enough horses to rattle off 60 wins this year. Yes. And I don't think it's quite on the same level as the Hawks with their 4 All-Stars when they rattled off 60 plus wins. I just feel like the Cavs are taking advantage and capitalizing on their softer schedule in ways that you got to do in the Eastern Conference. If you have a soft slate, take advantage when Giannis isn't playing. Take advantage when Paolo Banchero is not playing with the Magic. You can only play the schedule that's in front of you. And so as much as they've had a soft schedule, it's going to be soft for basically the whole year. So that's, if the Boston Celtics really wanted to, they could challenge for the all-time win record with how soft the East is this year. I don't know if they'll really care about that. I think they're going to care more about prioritizing their health going forward. They're not going to rush back Porzingis. But Cleveland and Boston are just going to have tons of schedule wins on their schedule.
when it comes to conference imbalance, I've wanted to go conferenceless for a long, long time. I just think it would be, I know people talk about tradition. They say, oh yeah, but then you don't get Celtics Lakers in the finals. You might get them in the first round if that's the way seeding breaks out. And I'm like, okay, so what?
That's cool.
That could be cool. That could be great. That could be amazing to get some of those great series. And also when you think about ratings are undeniably going down, whereas some other leagues are going up. And I think if you look at regular season interest level, how do you make the season more interesting? How do you make it more interesting? To me, I don't think having one conference where there's a bunch of average teams is necessarily going to drive up interest versus a race that involves everybody, that involves the opportunity to get great players in the postseason at the end of the year. Like you said, the fact is that in the West, right now it's 7 Kings, 8 Nuggets, 9 Grizzlies, 10 Lakers. 2 of those teams would miss the playoffs. It's possible Jokic could get bounced, even though his team might win 52 games or something like that, just because they're in the West. Is that really in the best interest of the league for the playoffs as well, where your regular season that is too long, that people have a perception that players aren't trying, which isn't necessarily true, but that's the perception, that you have this long season, October to April, and then all of a sudden, wait, the best player in the world got bounced, even though a team that won 37 games went in the East. You're telling me we don't get to see Ja Morant, even though the Grizzlies won 50 games and the Nets get in winning 38? That's not for the best for the postseason either. So if you're the NBA, I do think I get the traditional stuff, but you have to think about what is for the best for today's audience.
Right.
And to me, what they currently have is not at all.
Well, I'll throw another one at you, Kev. What if we just do a 58-game season where you play one home, one away for all 29 teams? There's no conference imbalance, and you're not worried about the travel problem because you've got multiple days off before those games. You get rid of back-to-backs, and you don't have the conference imbalance, and it feels like appointment television if you have 58 games on the schedule rather than 82. But This is a moot point because we just signed a new TV deal, and the owners aren't going to give up the games. But I feel like you kill 2 birds with one stone there. You get rid of the conference imbalance and you get rid of the travel problem. I think a 58-game season is perfect, but we can't have these nice things.
Ben Thompson, the amazing tech blogger at Stratechery, he always has written about, bulk versus events when it comes to how, the NBA, for the NBA's purposes, for listeners of this, it would mean the NBA is bulk. 82 games, that's what they sell. They sell bulk. The event is now the NBA Cup. It is the playoffs. It is the finals. I think 58 games would feel more like events, where you would have designated days where every NBA team plays. It would feel more like the rhythm of an NFL schedule where it's, granted the NFL has now expanded. They play Wednesday sometimes, Saturday sometimes, but the NFL is typically Sunday, Monday premiere game, Thursday premiere game. The NBA could be, Tuesdays and Fridays, and then maybe there's a marquee game on a Sunday and a Wednesday where it's like the 2-star teams or something like that, however you want to break it down. But to me, this would make the NBA feel more like big events. And then when you expand to 32 teams, then the schedule can become, face every team twice, 62 games, then you have the NBA Cup on top of that. You still have a lot of bulk as well.
But I think also on top of that, you mentioned the in-season tournament, Kev, it propagates the imbalance by having the groups only by conference. So a Western Conference team has to be grouped with Western Conference teams. And so even with the knockout stages of the IST, you're seeing that kind of play out where the East teams are going to have an easier time getting into the quarterfinals than the West. And also, Golden State and Memphis are so much better this year, and they're going to be grouped in with tougher teams because they were not as good last year, right? So the way the NBA tried to figure this out is they looked at last year's standings and tried to group you evenly by your win percentage the year before. But Memphis is going to, I feel so bad for the teams in that Memphis group because now they got to face Ja Morant when they were one of the worst teams last year. And so it's not a perfect system. I like the in-season tournament. I like the play-in tournament. I do think that there's a lot of slack in the system.
And for what it's worth, that group C in the West, that's Denver, Dallas, New Orleans, Golden State, Memphis. Loaded.
Yeah. Whoops.
Like you said, it's all moot, but hey, I wish. I really do wish the NBA was able to do this, or would just do it for a year. Try it out. 1 year. Talk about an event. This one season we're going conferenceless, and we're going to see how it goes. But it's not going to happen. A reminder to listeners to please subscribe to the Kevin O'Connor Show wherever you're listening to this podcast. Okay, Tom, so you were covering the Blazers game on Thursday night. They faced the San Antonio Spurs. My third thought so far this season is I don't like the Chris Paul fit in San Antonio. I'm not a fan of it so far. I was looking at the pace stats on unpredictable.com. Last season, the Spurs played at the 5th fastest tempo after made shots, the 3rd quickest tempo after rebounds, the 5th quickest tempo after turnovers. This season, that has dropped to 17th after makes, 19th after rebounds, 27th after turnovers. And who is the reason for that? It is, of course, the point guard, Chris Paul, who notoriously throughout his career, to the benefit of his offenses in his prime, slows things down to his pace. And I don't like the way that has affected Victor Wembanyama, where 45% of his shots are now coming from 3, up from 33% last year. Only 28% of his shots are coming at the rim, down from 33% last year, down from nearly 40% over the second half of last season. The Chris Paul effect, so far, my early thoughts are I'm not a fan of it. 2 thumbs down. Tom Haberstroh, what do you think?
I think something has to change in San Antonio when it comes to Wemby. That game that I watched on Thursday night confirmed a lot of the things that I was worrying about going into that tilt against the Portland Trailblazers, because the problem is with Wemby, he has the most toxic shot profile in the NBA. This guy is 7'5" and is a walking dunk every time he steps out on the floor. And Chris Paul was supposed to deliver more alley-oops, more lobs to Victor Wembanyama. Whether it's because of the style of play and the pace that you're describing, or if it's just, I don't know, a mentality from Wemby. He's too nice. I'm going to go ahead and say it. He needs to be more of an asshole. He does. Like, he is bailing out the defense routinely when he's playing, when they have the ball. You look at his shot profile, Kev. He's taking more threes than he did last year, like you noted. 6.9 three-pointers per game. His points per shot on a three-pointer is 0.7. His points per shot on a non-rim 2, so everything outside the basket, is 0.7. Okay, he's taking over 4 of those per game. So between non-rim 2s and 3s, he's taking 11 of those shots at 0.7 points per shot. Then you look at the rim. The dude is shooting 75% at the rim. 75%. He's taking 4.8 shots at the rim this year. So that's an average point per shot of 1.5. And the other shots, which he's taking twice as many of, are at 0.7. That imbalance needs to be corrected. It might have something to do with Chris Paul running the offense and slowing things down. But to me, he's got to be more nasty out there. He's got to go in there. And I know Kendrick Perkins, we laugh like some of the things that he says, but he's right. He needs to stop thinking he's Kevin Durant and think more like he's Giannis. And I think that is part of the problem here, is that Wemby's too nice. Like last night, Thursday night against Jeremy Grant, he got in a fight with that dude. Like he was flopping and they were going at it and there was like technicals thrown out. Jeremy Grant is like getting in a fight with Taylor Swift. Like, he's the most mild-mannered dude in the NBA, and Victor's like flopping and falling onto the ground, and there was like a little scuffle. I don't know what it is, but I kind of thought that Wemby would have more of a chip on his shoulder. It's the reason why I had such high hopes, is that after last season and all the experiments they did in the offense, they get some real players in Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul. He loses in the gold medal game. I thought he would come out with a vengeance. And the way he's playing this season, he's bailing out the defense every time the Spurs get the ball. And that needs to change, Kev.
Getting in a fight with Taylor Swift?
Yeah. Why would you do that? It's Jeremy Grant. Like, I don't know if Jeremy Grant's even had a technical in his life, and you're like picking a fight with that dude and falling onto the ground multiple times. Why?
I mean, it also shows, didn't Jeremy Grant push him on the ground kind of twice?
Come on, man. Like, if you watch, that was not worthy of what happened after that. It was. Look, man, like there have been times where he gets a pull-up three opportunity and to shoot, and the defense is like, go, yes, please take that, because if you attack the rim off the dribble, we can't guard you. And he had like 3 shots at the rim against the Blazers, and they've done a great job this season, I'll add. The Blazers have done a good job of keeping players out of the paint. But again, this is a mindset to me, is just you're settling. You're bailing out the defense every time that you take a pull-up three or not attacking the rim. And they've got to figure out ways, actions to get Wemby at the rim more, because that's criminal. Like 0.7 points per shot for Wemby, and he's doing it 11 times per game. It's something they need to recalibrate.
They do. And I think with Chris Paul, this was apparent opening night of the season. Teams are switching that pick and roll. You know, Victor is unable to post up. He is unable to effectively take advantage of those situations. Chris Paul also, with the slow pace, I don't think he's done the job that he needs to in playing fast and up-tempo and getting Victor some of those transition opportunities that we saw him increasingly get last season. That's where you get those chances. Open floor, playing fast. Slowing it down does not help your cause there. But even in the half court, though, look, I want to see more creativity from Pop. I know he's out right now. Their interim head coach, Mitch Johnson. I just want to see more creativity to get Victor these chances at the rim. And I don't think we're seeing that. Too often they're just throwing him the ball at the elbow. Too often he's sitting in a corner. Too often he's just setting a screen and the defense is switching that. And I don't feel like there's many layers to this offense right now that we've seen in the past great Spurs teams. And I know it's unfair to compare Chris Paul and, you know, Stephon Castle and Jeremy Sohan and Victor to Tim Duncan and Manu and Tony Parker. It's a dramatically different scale of talent level, but it would be nice just to see a bit more layers to this offense. And part of that is because the team doesn't practice much under Pop. They don't watch much film. And I think that is something that needs to change moving forward with Victor. Maybe one of the issues here with Wemby, with him being too nice, to your point, is that he's in a system where Pop is Pop. He's the greatest coach ever, where he's playing with CP3, one of the greatest point guards ever, and he doesn't feel like he's in a position to stomp his feet down and say, hey, give me more touches. Treat me like Jokic. Treat me like Giannis. Let me run the show more often. Set a screen for me and let me create. Have shooters coming around screens with me running DHOs. And I think that's where I want to see Victor more as the centerpiece of the offense, rather than watching the Chris Paul show where he's, you know, still near the top of the league in touches, still near the top of the league in, you know, possession time at his age. It's not what I'd hope for with this combination at all.
How dare you? How dare you, the point god? How dare you besmirch him?
Wouldn't you rather see Chris Paul in a winning situation anyway? Like, wouldn't you rather see CP get waived or traded and send him to a contender and see if he can go get his elusive ring?
I mean, it's the same problem that Denver has with Russell Westbrook. Is like, who else are they going to lean on? You know, just the roster is like, they need Chris Paul because they just don't have the depth, right? They're at the point guard position. Although Wesley had a great game on Thursday night against the Blazers. So my thing is Wemby, Caleb Martin has twice as many free throws than Wemby. That shouldn't happen. Like, Wemby's the most unguardable guy in the NBA if he wants to be. And right now, it just doesn't seem that he wants to be. Maybe he's, you know, saving his body for later in the season, turned it on last year late. Maybe that's going to happen. But I'm pretty disappointed with the season so far with Wemby. I know he's leading the league in blocks and doing a good job defensively, but the San Antonio has been a little bit of a disappointment this year, to say the least. What
were your thoughts on Stephon Castle watching him last night?
I love Castle. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's a really smart player, a guy that is, I think, a long-term fit next to Wemby, really good. And they got Devin Vassell coming back. So things are going to be fitting together nicely. And I think Chris Paul with more veterans and spacers, it's going to be better for them. But I think he's legit. And it was cool to see Klingon and Castle go at it Thursday night. It was nice to see. And we've talked about the rookies and how they had a slow start, but I'm a believer in Castle and Klingon.
Yeah, me too. I love both those guys. They were ranked, I think I had first and second and third on my board. This year I had Reed 1, Castle 2, Klingon 3, if I remember correctly. Love both of them. Castle just needs shots to fall. He's shooting 12.5% from 3, 63% from the free throw line. I'm a believer in his shot, though. He has better touch from the line than I think the small sample indicates, but everything else is already there. The connective playmaking, the rebounding, the defense. I like Castle a lot. Next up on my list, Sacramento Kings fans will be very happy to hear me say, as a notorious Sacramento Kings skeptic, that I've been very, very impressed by the Domantas Sabonis-DeMar DeRozan combination this season. This year, when that duo is on the floor, they are posting a 123 offensive rating, a 108.8 defensive rating. That's a plus 14.2 net rating. DeRozan taking 2.6 3-pointers per game, making 38% of them. It's only the fourth time in his career he's attempted over 2 threes per game. Sabonis taking 2 3-pointers per game, making half of them. That's the most threes he has attempted in a game per game this season in his Kings career. I'm loving the way those guys are adapting. I love the fact that they are taking more threes. I love the way in which they are playing together as a duo. It's working next to Keegan Murray, who seems to be taking a leap. It's working next to De'Aaron Fox. It is working next to all of their role players, Keon Ellis. It's working. And I'm very impressed by the progress the Sacramento Kings have made this season, Tom.
Yeah, I think they got to make the leap this year with that DeMar DeRozan acquisition. Devin Carter's been out, but they will be getting him later. I think he's going to be a good pro right away. He's got the skill set to be a difference maker for them down the stretch.
Love Devin Carter, man. That guy's a dog, dude. Like, I think he's going to come in right away and make an impact, I believe. Love him. Like, everything Keon Ellis does, if a Kings fan, like, isn't that familiar with, Devin Carter at all, the things you love about Keon Ellis, you will love about Devin Carter.
100%. I can't wait to watch him on the Kings. It's going to be one of those things where you're going to remind yourself, oh yeah, they still got that dude on the roster. Like the Celtics have Porzingis. There's other teams that you look at and you're like, yeah, but wait till they get this player on their roster. I think Sacramento is going to get a new dimension with Devin Carter. It may not be like right away. Rookies don't usually have that kind of positive impact right away, but the way he plays, his age, his pedigree, his father playing in the NBA, I just think he's going to be a leg up from where the rest of the rookie class is. Sacramento, the continuity, you would hope that the continuity is going to pay off here, is that this core that they've had with De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Sabonis, this is, if they don't break through one of these years, you're going to have to look at this roster and say, we got to make wholesale changes. But right now, they're showing that they can get a little bit better on the margins here with DeMar DeRozan and Sabonis kind of evolving just slightly, and hopefully it pays much bigger dividends. And they're going to be in that mix with, the 7, 8, 9, 10 range this season, just because how good the Western Conference is. I think people were wondering, hey, is Brandon Ingram a fit for the Sacramento Kings? And DeMar DeRozan has been that vet so far that looks really good. I want to talk about New Orleans. Zion Williamson right now looks like mini Mario. Like Super Mario Brothers, where like Mario is the little Mario, and then he gets bigger when he eats the mushroom, and then suddenly he's jumping around. He's so much better for you, and he can do so many more things. We talk about Zion Williamson, Kev, like he never plays. He's always injured. I'm worrying that like right now, even when he plays, he's not Zion anymore. Like he's dealing with this hamstring injury. It's worrisome to me when you look at his lift. His second jump ability is second to none in the NBA. It's the quickest second jump in the NBA. And that's part of the reason why he gets such high percentage shots where he's shooting 60, 70% routinely in the NBA. Zion Williamson is getting blocked more than any other player in the NBA. He's leading the league in block shots in a bad way, okay? And it's not particularly close when you look at the number of and ones that he's had. You want to see like a one-to-one relationship with when you're getting blocked or contact, you're finishing through strong. Zion Williamson has been pretty good in that category over his career, but this season it's been flipped and very bad, trending in the wrong direction. You look at the number of dunks that he's had this season. It peaked his rookie season, his percentage of field goal attempts that are dunks, and it's gone down every single year. And my question to you, Kev, is like, what if Zion Williamson, this is just who he is. Like, even when he does play, he just looks like he's a less athletic version of himself. And the idea of Zion Williamson as this like athletic marvel that's just going to be a wrecking ball at the rim. What happens when, if he's 24 years old, he's actually looking 34 years old?
It means it's time to pull the plug if you're the Pelicans on what you're building. It means that it's time to reset in some way, shape, or form. And it means that Zion's value league-wide is going to be lower than it already is. And with Zion this season, you're 100% right, Tom. Like that 5 for 20 game he had against Golden State. I know Draymond has been tremendous defensively this season. So credit to the Warriors as well. But that 5 for 20 game Zion had against Golden State, I think it was last week, worrisome. He just doesn't look like he has the same pop at all. He's shooting career low percentage at the rim. Like you said, he's leading the league in blocks against. There's no good indicators here. And he just doesn't look like he has that same pop, that same explosiveness at the rim. And so with Zion, remember this summer, the photos of him, he looked great. He looked lean. I'm like, oh my God, Zion, what if he has an MVP caliber season? It's the total opposite of what you could have hoped for with the weight loss. And honestly, watching him on the court, he just doesn't look necessarily any thinner to me. I don't know what I was seeing with those photos. I really
keep your third eye open, Kev. Maybe there's some Photoshop we're not aware of, that there's some sort of like misinformation campaign about doctored photos of Zion Williamson. I don't know, Kev. I feel the same way. Like Zion is like a summer MVP. Ben Simmons and him, like they fight over who's the summer MVP. Because I every year I'm like, ooh, talking myself into Zion Williamson having a breakout season, and then kind of looks the same.
It's scary, if you're a Pelicans fan, it's scary because, you're 3-6 right now on the year. Obviously, you have guys out injured. You missed time with Trey Murphy. Now Hawkins dealing with stuff, Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray. It's a lot of guys that are hurt, but I think it was maybe after DeJounte Murray got hurt, you and I had talked about how, well, hey, this presents an opportunity for Point Zion.
Yep.
Do you think it's worth forgiving the lower production from Zion considering the amount of guys that are out, or has this just merely exposed this new version of Zion Williamson with the pressure that's put on him? In other words, what I'm saying is it come playoff time, you need to do more. And if this is what you're going to get from him when he's asked to do more, that really shows and exposes how lower this Pelican ceiling is than maybe they would have anticipated.
Here are his percentage of field goal attempts at the rim over his career. On Basketball Reference, 0 to 3 feet, 75% rookie year, 70% his second year, 62% his third year when he played, 55% last season, and now it's 39%.
Jeez, man.
We're having a Wemby problem here where it's like, if this guy isn't around the rim or getting to the rim, and part of that might be just personnel and spacing and trying to figure out these new guys. But that's not a trend that you want to see, is that Zion Williamson is a monster around the basket. And the volleyball games that he plays sometimes where he misses the layup, he gets it right back and finishes. Those Z-bounds, as we like to call them, they haven't been there as much this season. So it's trending in the wrong direction for Zion. And that's the problem when you hang on to a franchise pillar like that who's often injured. You can't get full value for him until it's too late, A
reminder to listeners to send in questions for the mailbag to KOCshow@yahoosports.com. We'll be bringing that back on next Tuesday's episode. Okay, Tom, last one on my list here. Here's a stat for you, okay? There's 2 players logging over 100 touches per game this season. Nikola Jokic is first, no surprise there. The other player is Jalen Johnson from the Atlanta Hawks. He's logging over 100 touches this season. The Hawks have changed his usage. One of the things that I've noticed looking at the synergy stats is he's running way more pick and roll per game this year. And that was apparent watching the Knicks game earlier this week. There's these plays in the first half that stood out watching Atlanta versus New York. There was a play where Jalen Johnson ran pick and roll, Clint Capella as the screener. Hart went over the screen. Johnson drove, put out on a little hesitation dribble to keep Hart behind him, created space, hit a leaning floater, leaning away from the basket with his right hand. Then later in the game, ran another pick and roll. This time Hart went under the screen, and then Jalen Johnson stepped back and drained a 3. So With Jalen Johnson, the numbers efficiency-wise aren't even great so far this year. Shooting below 30% from three. He is not shooting at the same efficiency he did last year. However, the usage is way up. Pick and roll possessions are way up. And I like the flashes of what they're envisioning with this 6'10" guy who plays like Ben Simmons with a confident jump shot. And I think Jalen Johnson, it's pretty clear that the Hawks are making an investment in this guy to say, hey, we need you to be that second star next to Trae Young for us to take a leap. And even though the numbers have not exactly panned out yet with him after he signed his extension this offseason, I'm a believer in him. And I think over the course of time, we'll see him return to his norm from last year.
I had no idea this guy went to Duke. What was his season at Duke like? Because I think for a lot, he fell to 20th in the draft. He's kind of been underrated his first couple of years in the league, and then he made the leap last year. He gets the big contract now. He's every bit the guy that they rewarded in the offseason with that extension and more. So can you explain to me the Jalen Johnson story of how he kind of snuck up on the league?
So he opted out of playing at Duke. He had I think it was a foot injury or an ankle injury his freshman year at Duke, and he could have came back, decided not to come back. It wasn't a great Duke team, and he decided just to train for the draft. And so, Duke fans and Duke, and college basketball fans as a whole viewed him as a quitter. NBA people may have also viewed him as a quitter, but there's plenty of people who just said, okay, this is a guy that's focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's getting to the NBA. And that's the choice that he made. And I think his improvement on a year-to-year basis does show that he's not some loser that doesn't love basketball. I think it's just the opposite, actually. I think he's proven that, yes, indeed, that he did make the choice that he felt would best set him up for success. I mean, if you look at his year-to-year improvement, like purely on points per game, that's it. 2.4 as a rookie to 5.6 to 16 last year to 18.9 this year. That's just one very basic stat, but at least is an indicative of how it basically has doubled each year until this year, which went up a little bit from last season. I think Jalen Johnson, versatile defender, 6'10", with a little bit of a shot. He can drive. He can play two-man stuff with Trae Young, dribble handoff, screener. He's just super versatile. And what he was at Duke was just absent, and that's it. And so we didn't get to see a lot of him. And so that created uncertainty with him around the draft. But so far for Atlanta, 4 years in, looking like worth the investment, worth the risk for a guy who was a bit of a mystery box after missing basically the entire Duke season.
Well, thank you for educating me on that. You talked about him being absent. The player that I'm going to be talking about here with my fifth and final note, Ja Morant, absent last year because of the injury and the suspension. But I love what I'm seeing in terms of the playing style, how fast he's been, how in attack mode he's been, in particular with the pace of play. So you mentioned unpredictable stats earlier about the pace of play of the San Antonio Spurs. Did you know that Memphis, off of a defensive rebound, are averaging 8.7 seconds to their first shot?
Wow.
The Spurs, off of a turnover, is 8.5 seconds per shot to the first shot.
Wow.
So the Memphis Grizzlies are turning defensive rebounds into turnover opportunities because of Ja Morant's rockets for legs. This guy, every time down the floor, wants to create a fast break. He wants to create a 7 seconds or less offense. Even taking the ball out of the basket, they rank number 1 in the NBA. Right now, 10.5 seconds time to first shot for all field goal attempts this season. That is the quickest in the NBA. And also, I think a full second quicker than the 7 seconds or less Suns. So when you look historically, we really rarely see a team this fast, this just hell-bent on getting to the rack as soon as possible. And that's Ja Morant, man. Like, him in the open court is right there with LaMelo and Ant, the most exciting guy in the league. And the Memphis Grizzlies are building everything around that. And they're like Indiana last year, right, Kev? Like, Indiana's idea is like, no matter what happens, we are going to try to race you out of the gym. Made basket, turnover, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We're going to race you out of the gym. And that's what the Ja Morant Memphis Grizzlies are doing this season. It's so much fun to watch. There's a little bit of, he might be getting ahead of himself sometimes, a little sloppy in transition. But man, those like 360 layups, the attacks around the basket, the way he can find guys on the move, it's so exciting to see. And it just makes the defense, you can't fall asleep for a second. You can't blink because Ja Morant's going to beat you the other way around.
You know who this really benefits? I really like Jalen Wells, their rookie. He's making almost 40% of his threes as a rookie, second-round pick, but he's just so good with those sprint outs and transitions, stop on a dime, catch it, launch a three-pointer. This team just plays fast and fun and free. And like you said, that stems from Ja. But also I think the supporting cast around him is, constructed for this style of play as well. Jay Huff, three-pointer, 3.7-footer. Just this team has a lot of fun, exciting role players that operate around Ja. And then Zach Edey, our guy, rookie of the year. He hit a trail three the other night. Yep. It's coming up stepped a little slower.
Confident.
Stepped into it. Yeah. I mean, I just love this Memphis team. They have so much range in terms of their types of players that they have, where you have a 300-pound-ish 7'4" guy in Zach Edey flanked by smaller, quick Ja Morant. This team is fun. It's just a fun team to watch. I've really enjoyed watching the Memphis Grizzlies. I love their role players, dude. I really do.
They're great. And I want to see a little bit more consistency from them. Ja missed a game earlier this year, but so far he's been very available for them. Jaren Jackson Jr., they need to get healthy. Desmond Bane's going to be out for a while. But I love what I'm seeing from Memphis, and they were one of your big picks earlier this season. Could they, surprise us and be a title contender this season? And the availability was the big question. It looks like Ja is going to be out for Friday night's game, which is upsetting, but hopefully he gets over that issue and he's going to be able to play and be an absolute turbo jet engine out there every time down the floor. Because when he's out there, the NBA is just better.
Yeah, exactly. Next week, two really good marquee games for Ja and the Grizzlies. Wednesday against the Lakers, Friday against the Warriors, and then they have two games against the Nuggets on the Sunday and Tuesday following that. So they get some big ones coming up after Washington on tonight, Friday, and then Sunday you'll see them against the Blazers when you broadcast that game. Tom, you have any other good weekend plans going on?
I don't. You got any concerts you're going to?
No concerts this weekend. Nope. No other concerts on my list. David Gilmour was the last one for a while. He is finishing up his tour. He's playing in New York City. So if you're on the East Coast and you want a chance to see a legend, a guitar legend, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, finishing up his run of shows at Madison Square Garden, 78 years old. You never know how long these guys will last. If you want to go see David Gilmour Saturday and Sunday at MSG, highly recommend it. Great set list, mixing some of his own solo stuff and some of the Pink Floyd classics as well. He's incredible.
I wonder if Jeff Teague and his crew went to the Indianapolis concert with Taylor Swift. She was in Indianapolis this week, and I know a bunch of people in North Carolina made the trip. What I'm just trying to do, Kev, is to make sure we get one musician drop, one needle drop every episode of the KOC show. And we've done it. We've done it. We're streaking.
You see her live? Did you see her?
I haven't, but I have two daughters. They're 5 and 7, so it's inevitable. It's going to happen.
I went to Taylor Swift at SoFi in Los Angeles last year, and I was the only man in my section. The only one. I was up in the nosebleeds, and it was a row of mothers and their daughters, and then just a bunch of girls all through the section. I was the only guy, as far as I could tell, in my entire section, and I had a great time. It was awesome. I went solo. It was on a whim. Got a ticket the day of, and I went in there admiring Taylor Swift, liking some of her music, especially the album Red. And Evermore and Folklore. And then I left a Swiftie. I left a Swiftie. It's a religious experience in the sense that it is 100,000 people just screaming and shouting every single word to every song. It's really remarkable what she's built, and she's a great performer. It's a great show too.
You've been converted, and it took two daughters. The first one, I was converted immediately. I know way more Taylor Swift songs I never would have imagined, but I love having daughters, and big reason why is because I can just jam out to Taylor Swift. I'm not afraid to admit it's great. It's a lot of fun.
It is great. It is great.
Even when you're surrounded by people where you're like, I'm the only guy here. I'm actually enjoying this. I love this. And I'm glad you've been converted.
It was a great time. Yes, I'll never forget that night. I will never forget that night. It was one of the best shows I've ever been to, by far. It was awesome. Tom, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will talk to you again next Friday.